Are live. Right then, hi everybody, welcome to tonight's live. It feels like 5 minutes ago we were doing this for National Dog Breeder Convention, and here we are at the end of January. How has that happened? I hope you guys are all well, and thank you for being with us this evening. I'm really pleased to be here with Will Dixon from My Licensed Breeder, who's come in today to talk to us, and we're going to have a chat, really, I think is what's going to happen, obviously involving you guys. We want it to be a fluid discussion. We want your feedback. We want questions. So I've got my phone at the ready. So anybody wants to jump in and ask a question, do so, please. Write it down in the chat. But we want it to be an inclusive conversation around the DEFRA review that has just been, the guidance that's just been published. Some of you may or may not know about it, might be confused about it, might not be sure how it affects you, or it may affect you, because none of it's set in stone at the moment. So we just thought that we would jump on, have a chat about it. Will is involved in a lot of parliamentary debate. He speaks to various different people on lots of different levels about licensing, about licensed breeders, about the arena in general, and he's got some really good stuff to come and share with you all. So I've dragged him over to in the Whelping Box group to pick his brains on this stuff. So I'd like you all to give him a warm welcome. Will, thank you very much for being with us this evening.
No worries. Glad to be here. Hello, everybody.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about My Licensed Breeder before we start? For those of you that don't know you, give us a bit of an intro so they know who you are and what you do.
Okay, My Licensed Breeder is basically a opportunity for responsible breeders or licensed breeders just to have an opportunity to educate themselves on the Animal Welfare Act, whether that's England, Scotland, Wales, or Northern Ireland, through CPD or individual workshops. We also have a network supporting licensed breeders who we advocate for. Hopefully some of the members may be on tonight watching the live. Kind of like a union. As Rebecca said, we go to Parliament and challenge certain practices and look to introduce other methods to support licensed breeders, because we know it can be tough at times. And we do other things as well, like the Digital Pawprint, to support licensed breeders, kind of keeping up with the legislation. But that's us as an overview.
Excellent. Okay, well, we've got lots of people joining and saying hi, hello, good evening. We've got Patricia and Sandy and Victoria and Susan and Janine and Winchester Crown Yorkies, and Mike Evans is here, and if I've forgotten anybody, I'm really sorry. Janine, Susan, Kerry, Joe, loads of people, 25 so far. So I thought what I would do is, I've read this document that's been released. It was released just before Christmas, and actually it was a little while in the coming. We've been waiting for it for a while. And what's happened is they have reviewed the guidance, okay, which I think we can all agree is something that needs to be done, because the guidance in essence means well, but I think most of you will agree that in practice it doesn't scribe brilliantly for everybody, and it must be very difficult to come up with guidance that blanket suits everyone, right? Yeah. Okay, that can't be an easy thing to try to achieve. So first of all, you got to try and be reasonable about it. It's very difficult to write something that is going to absolutely cover everything, but at the heart of it should be the dog welfare. That is being the focal point of the guidance when it comes to dog breeding. And this review is not just about dog breeding, okay? So when you do get the licensing, and I'll put a copy of it in the comments later on, when you get a copy of it, just forget about the rest of it and go to page 30, okay? Because you're going to look at it and it's to do with horse riding activities, cat breeding, pet shop, it's all manner of stuff. But page 30 is what we are, what we are interested in. So that will help to cut out a bit of the jargon for you. Like, you can look at this document and go, oh my God, have I got to wade through all of that? It's not as bad as that. Page 30, okay? So I want to kind of kick off with asking you, Will, specifically, what do you think? I mean, they've published numbers right at the very top, the first paragraph, they've published numbers of licensed breeders. Okay. And I
Yes.
have to say, I was quite shocked.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts around that?
Okay, so yeah, there's been other publications as well on what they thought post the 2018 regulations. It's not obviously by DEFRA, it's by another organisation of at that point in 2018 how many licensed breeders there should have been, and that was more around 6,000. We were aware there was around 2,800 breeders at this current date. So yeah, the thoughts are there should be more licensed breeders if we want to be honest. And when they've said that they believe the implementation of the 2018 regulations has been a success, it's exceeded initial projections. I suppose we can all make our judgments on that alongside that figure. Hopefully
I
that
mean, when you
answers that
look at,
diplomatically.
yeah, absolutely. No, and when it's not about sort of finger pointing and backstabbing, is it? I think for me, it's about like understanding what it means for us. But for me, I look at those numbers and I think, okay, well, then we are a very, very, as licensed breeders as a community, we are a really small proportion of the people in England. And I have to say again, the licensing that we're talking about this evening is specific to the English guidance, not the Scottish and not the Welsh. Although Will has pointed out earlier on that there are some significant changes in the Scottish and Welsh legislation. So if you are in those areas, guys, you need to be aware that there are different pieces of guidance for you in your specific countries. This is England that we're talking about, although as Will was saying, that they're going to be rippling most of it out and trying to come up with a unified approach to all of it, which would be a lot more straightforward, I think. We'll all agree. But I think regarding the numbers, I was really surprised. I thought that number, my projections were that they were going to be a hell of a lot higher than that. When you think about the volume of puppies that are for sale on sales platforms, the amount of people that are not licensed, I mean, that's quite staggering. So for them to be feeling like it's been successful in that regard, again, unfortunately, I don't echo that sentiment. I think we need to be doing more. I'm really chuffed, and I had a big smile on my face when they start to talk about differentiating between small scale breeders and larger scale breeders. I think most people are in agreement that there should be differences for the different types of breeding operations. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, yes, look, as our members, that's all we hear about. When we referred to our 2024 survey that was conducted, a lot of the feedback we received is unfair. You've got bigger breeds and operations that are following similar guidelines to a domestic premises who, might have one or two litters a year, and should they be paying the same cost? It kind of whittled down to, and in some councils that's another area which they kind of looked at, because they've said that the streamline approach which they may be looking at will help save costs for breeders and make it more consistent. But different councils at the moment, or local authorities should I say, have different costs. Some ranging from £300 to £1,000, depending on the area and what's involved, and then the vets on top of that. So, one of the things we heard from our members and the survey we conducted was the cost. Why is it the same cost for someone who may have, a bigger bands of bandwidth of dogs and puppies per year than me, who's just on my own in domestic premises. So I do think, that's something we spoke about in Parliament. That's something we've raised. I feel like it's something that, not necessarily down to us, but that's being listened to, and I think that's welcomed. I think if the especially people of our network are hearing now that there's going to be a potential tiered process or something that is done for maybe medium risk breeders, then I think that's only going to be a positive in relation to what is required for compliance wise, because we know firsthand, it's difficult out there to keep up with everything. Like a business operation when you're just a one-man band.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, it should be different. I mean, my local authority does have a tiered approach already, and the fees are not extortionate for what they're doing. So I don't feel like I get an unjust service in that respect. But I do know people who are in neighbouring counties who are charged absolutely extortionate amounts of money, and they've got far, far fewer dogs than I have. But they're paying a lot more. So I think what we want to do is encourage a climate of licensed breeders for the good of the dogs, where we're going to uplift the whole of dog breeding as a whole. Then we have to make it unified for everybody. Otherwise, people feel, well, I'm not bothering because I've got to pay more. I've got less dogs. You know, it just undermines the whole thing, doesn't it? So I definitely think that is a welcomed thing for me. We've got a question from Jenny, she says that she has an issue in the definition of the requirement for a license, and this is something that I definitely want to talk to you about.
Okay.
My council thinks that anyone breeding is making money, therefore should be licensed. However, a friend in another council area was told that if she didn't have 3 or more litters, she didn't require a license. Can you break that down for us a little bit and give us your,
Okay.
you must get asked this question 1,000 times. You know,
Probably
what
my
are your
first,
thoughts around this?
my mailbox, I got to it, is inundated of, do I need a license? If can I just say first of all, if anybody is unsure what area they are based in, if they need a license, some blood, sweat, and tears, because it seems a bit simple when you use it, went behind it, because it can be complex depending on where you are located in the UK. But we do have a questionnaire. I like to call it a calculator, but it's told it's not. It doesn't calculate anything. So there's a questionnaire. Do I need a license? If you're unsure, do go and have a look at that on our website. I don't know if there's a link on any of our socials. I'm not sure, but do have a go with that. So licensing, okay, and one of the main benefactors on whether a breeder decides, and it's usually the breeder, if I'm being honest, decides whether they need a license or not, is on earnings. And that's not the case for across the UK, but we'll focus on England. I'm not too sure if the breeders from England or not, but I'll just focus on the English legislation. And whether they decide if they need it or not is what they make profit. They always base it on profit, and they say, well, the threshold for the government, so on whether any business is to be registered with HMRC under the business test is £1,000 or over £999. So we find a lot of breeders that will say, well, after all my outgoings and I paid for whatever and it cost me this, that, and the other, I might have my show dogs, and that's cost. I didn't earn anything over £1,000, so I don't need a license. And we do find inconsistency across the local authorities who agree with that and say, yeah, you don't need a license, you're not earning enough. However, earning and profit is different, and that's where some confusion is. And the enforcement officer may be up to date with profits and earnings. So in England, to break it down, if you earn before anything is deducted, any costs over £999 within a 12-month period, the tax period April to April, then you'll fall under the business test, which under English license and regulations would mean that you require a license to breed as you're selling to the general public. There can be some confusion as the border for Wales, and some fall under Wales and they might not, so and they're close by, so the regulations is a little bit different. So you might get a neighbour, I say neighbour, or a few towns down that does have it a little bit different, so it could be that we found. However, in England, the base point is the earnings, and you know, when we've looked at that and done some research, it's quite hard not to earn £999, regardless of the deductions. So that would mean that a majority, and we kind of touched on the numbers of licensed breeders, that would say the majority of people out there advertising now would require a license. The threshold 3 litters, we get it all the time. I can only have 3 litters. I can have 2 litters if I have a 30-year license. That is true, but only if you're giving them away. And I say giving them away, you can get some costings back underneath that £999 or £899. but you need to evidence that if to be inspected. Hopefully I've explained that okay, but the free
Yeah, no, you have, and we're in the comments. We've got people agreeing with you. Tax and license should be separate, two separate things. Licensing should be around the breeding of dogs rather than how much money you make from it. That's an issue for the tax inspector, which I don't disagree with that actually. And Ian saying it should be made very simple. If you sell a puppy, you need a license to do so, which actually, in a roundabout way, they are going to start to implement that kind of process, or they're suggesting that they may introduce a registration scheme.
Yes.
Whereby every puppy that's bred is registered with the local council. It's going to be linked in with microchipping as well, and compliance around microchipping and the law around microchipping. But they're saying that if every puppy that's born is registered with the local authority, we then have data that we can then look at and work out how many litters that person's having, and that actually the business test, the financial element of it, is going to be removed, and that it would then go back to the how many litters per year rule. Whether it remains at 3 or not stands to be
just to jump in on that. I think the main thing here, and that's why I said true to that statement, is it's not about the money, it's about the welfare of the animals. And you mentioned that at the beginning. Let's not get away from the fact this is all within good intention. The legislation, it's to improve the welfare of the dogs that we have, and we don't have these unscrupulous breeders doing things that we
unethical stuff. Absolutely.
So absolutely. The business test is there to kind of guide and enforcement of to say, well, you need a license, but does that generally mean that you're doing things correctly? Well, maybe not. I think the main thing is the registration. If that is something that they do seek in the avenue to go down, we welcome that, because if everyone is doing things as they should and can evidence good practice, and it will weed out those unscrupulous breeders.
Completely. I agree, and I think that anybody worth their salts. Okay, it's going to be a ball ache to have to register every single puppy born. It's additional admin for everybody. But actually, if you look at the bigger picture of what that could actually mean for dogs, in our heart of hearts, anybody that's ethical and responsible is going to go, okay, well, it's going to be a bit more, ball ache for us having to register every single puppy that is born with the local authority. However, that's got to be of benefit rather than having large areas, grey, unregulated, unlicensed breeding going on over here that may or may not be good quality, but nobody's looking at it. It's not, not everybody that doesn't have a license is a crap breeder. That's the other side of the coin as well, isn't it? You've got to look at it realistically as well. There's lots of people that are not licensed that do a good job, but they just don't feel like they need a license, or that they've been told that they're not in scope, or they've decided that they're not in scope. But I think the fact that if they're wanting puppies to be registered with the local authority, we start to be able to monitor and track breeding activity. And what they have said is that the sales platforms would need to be involved in that, because it's no good if all of the appropriate breeding practices and people are correctly registering with the local authority, if then people that are not registering with the local authority can just jump onto a sales platform and sell their puppies anyway. So they're saying there needs to be correlation in those two things. Mike's making a really interesting point. And actually we've got some questions coming in, so I'm going to shut up and read some questions for a minute. Vanessa's saying, why not say small breeders should have a diploma to show competence? We will talk about education for breeders in a minute. You'll be surprised to hear. Mike says his biggest issue is that this is called an animal welfare license, but if it was about welfare, then not needing a license if you give away puppies rather than sell them means they don't care about the welfare as long as you're giving them away. So they are linking finance to welfare.
I suppose it goes back to what we were just saying then. It's not about the business test. They've used that in England as because Scotland brought in, I don't want to go off track on other legislation. They initially in 2021 said, right, we've introduced the business test, and then they retracted it. But obviously they have different guidelines, so I won't go off on that one. But there's I agree. The business test isn't the fundamental part, and we can go on with the thing that HMRC have gone through recently by contacting the microchip companies, the Kennel Club, and contacting the councils. And there's been a big thing on that recently, hasn't it, by linking the two. And then they said that was a success. But I completely agree. The business test isn't a decisive one, and I don't want to kind of go off onto other avenues, but there's and we've spoken off before, Rebecca, about other industries that have breeding involved that don't need a license as well, and whether that's something that should be happening. But that shouldn't decipher whether you're a good breeder or not, or need a license or not. And I think it's important that, as Rebecca said, a register should be welcomed, because whether you're giving them away or not, there should be some record of the welfare of those dogs and puppies.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think some of the other stuff that they've brought in, or talking about bringing in, I like the fact that they're talking about going back to the litter numbers to decide whether you need a license or not. I think that makes it very clear. If we just have a number, how many litters do you have? Therefore, you are classed as a breeder, therefore you need a license. I think that's great, makes it really simple. The crossbreeding side of things, obviously something that's dear to my heart, is that if you crossbreed, you're almost penalised because you supposedly can't provide evidence of COI.
Yes.
And that is factually incorrect, because you can provide COI. And if you are first generation crossing, then COI is 0, because you are crossing 2 separate breeds. And there are a lot of people who are breeding crossbreeds in an ethical and responsible manner. Crossbreeds are here to stay, however you feel about them. They are not going to go anywhere. They're very popular, and people are going to continue to buy them. Therefore, people are going to continue to breed them. There is a trade route there. There is, a need, want from them, and people are going to continue to buy them. So people are going to continue to breed them. So as Jo Taylor says, and I know she's also a crossbreed breeder, you can provide genetic COI. It's just about the people who are receiving that information understanding the validity of it and understanding what they're actually licensing, because I think there is an issue here underlying with licensing inspectors themselves not being clear, not having the information, not knowing enough about dogs, really.
Can I just add
Yeah.
there, and this is to throw a caveat on the top of that. It's about the relevant organisations, and the PIR was put together from we don't know who organisations, DEFRA involved in the licensing process and reviewing it. So I'd like to know a little bit more around what input licensed breeders had, but when we look at the crossbreeds, there's a publication to say actually there was no differentiation between health as well. That was a report that came out, but the bodies that are around all the organisations and registrations have not kind of condoned it or allowed for it, and they might have a part to play in where we are at this moment in time, and the decisions that have been made in relation to that. It's great to see that they've looked at it and they've said, okay, this is here to stay. But it's about obviously what the people say now, the licensed breeders, and what the surveys that they conduct going forward, and what we can provide as evidence to say actually there's a need for crossbreeds. And I completely agree. They're not keeping themselves up to date with the new technologies, the new resources of information, like the genetic testing to prove coefficiency. So, I think it's a great move.
Yeah, I do, and it needs to be inclusive, not exclusive. And it's about time that crossbreeders were recognised and treated on the same level as purebred breeders, because there's a lot of crossbreed breeders out there. And I'm going to be blatant about it, and you guys, all people who follow me, already know my thoughts on this. There's a lot of crossbreed breeders doing a better job than pedigree breeders. Well, not all pedigree breeders, I don't mean that in a broad brushstroke, but you can't just because they're crossbreeds, stick them out in the cold. That it has to be inclusive, and the guidance needs to cover all dogs, crossbreed or not. Yeah. And
I think there's also, sorry, the registration side of things as well. There's been a limitation on registrations, which is in the licensing, that will need to change because they have to be registered under a certain body for them to be recognised. And again, some local enforcement officers are not, you mentioned before, are not aware of this or using that evidence that you can now be provided. And was it Kerry, did you say, that came up with that around the interbreeding bit?
Yeah. And I've got
so
people on here
fantastic.
saying, Jenny's saying that she uses the Kennel Club COI facility even for crossbreeding. It provides black and white 100% information from my licensing officer, which obviously her licensing officer is happy with. Trudy's saying some people have stopped registering their litters because the rumour is that HMRC are finding out information via the Kennel Club, so they don't want to register. They don't want to register their litters. Ian's asking, with the Kennel Club putting their prices up, and if you have to pay to register on top with the council, do you think there will be a lot less registered puppies?
Well, they're kind of saying the same thing. The two comments there, aren't they? That people aren't registering because of maybe being looked at by HMRC. And look, when we're looking at, are we talking about the costing in regards to licensing, or are we talking about the costings in regards to registrations?
Registrations, by the sounds of it.
Okay. Look, at the end of the day, about registrations is about making money, isn't it, really? So, without going too much into it, the need for registrations is required. So if there's a drop in that registration, I can only see that the cost will kind of carry across to who is registered, if that answers your question.
And I think that it hasn't been decided yet whether there is going to be a cost that you have to pay per puppy to the council. That's not that nobody's mentioned that there's a cost associated with that at this stage.
The only thing I can refer to in the PIR is they have said that it's been more streamlined once they've introduced the 2018 regulations, which has been cost effective. That's where they've then approached maybe having a tiered process to make it fairer. One of the things which I know a lot, even our members of who are still paper based as well, they've talked around moving towards a more digital approach, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and we're trying to adapt things to try and make things easier for people with the paw print, which we're building around what people tell us to do, because this doesn't do this or that doesn't do the other. So we're trying to make it easier for people to deal with the licensing requirements. However, they have said if they find a more streamlined approach which cuts down the administration task for the enforcement officer, that could result in a reduction or a more consistent approach across councils, because they can evidence what's going on and
yeah, they've got the information. I think some of the other reforms are really good. I think this the thought process of making it more unified and creating some clarity around it, so in my opinion, it almost doesn't need to be called guidance. It shouldn't be guidance. It should be, these are the rules. And then it's much more simple. Guidance leaves it open to interpretation, which is where I think all of the issues come in. I think if this is how we have to operate, it is like this. We were talking about dog poo, weren't we? Earlier on, before we came live, what is a safe and appropriate method of disposal of dog poo? Well, one, council are going to accept a dog poo wormery. Somebody else is going to let you double bag it and put it in your general waste. Somebody else wants you to have a commercial bin. It's like there are so many different ways of interpreting that. Let's just have a rule. If you're a dog breeder and you're getting rid of poo, this is what has to happen with the poo. These are your options. Do one of those. Make it clear. But some of the other reforms that they're talking about is a maximum breeding age, a reduction in the amount of caesarean sections that a bitch can have, the introduction of a fitness to breed certificate to protect against extreme conformation, and that fitness to breed certificate should also link into temperament assessment.
Which is
and more
brilliant.
robustly, the terminology is more robustly linked to health testing, and actually drilling down into the quality of the dogs that are being bred from in the first instance. And I think for me personally, you know, as a behaviourist, I really, really, really feel passionate about this particular point. I think that there are, and anybody that's done the courses with me know that I bang on about you know, what you're breeding from. You have to have a, you know, 30,000 foot view. Are you can't look at your own dogs and think, oh, they're wonderful, I love my dogs, therefore we're gonna have more of them. Because you just think they're wonderful doesn't mean everybody else is going to think they're wonderful, and it doesn't mean that they are appropriate to be bred from. So Joe Taylor's immediately jumped on the fitness to breed. Will that affect all the Frenchy bully type breeds that can't breed naturally? Yes, it will, Joe, because they're talking about fertility clinics and the appropriateness of them and how that implicates. But I'll get onto that in a minute. Yes, in answer to your question, Joe's on it straight away. The fitness to breed thing I think is really important, because for me, and I know again with you, Will, you know, the education piece around understanding what you're doing as a breeder. Not, I've got a nice dog called Daisy and she's got a nice friend at the park and his name's Ted and we want to have a lovely litter of puppies and won't it be lovely? We want to move away from that, and we want breeders to be, you know, educated, knowledgeable, understanding properly what they are doing and what they are producing, so that we are reducing the amount of animals that are in rescue, so that we are reducing the amount of dogs that are being put to sleep for behavioral reasons. You know, all of that kind of stuff that goes hand in hand with ethical breeding. And sometimes that means looking at a dog, evaluating that dog and going, do you know what, that dog's not actually fit for purpose. I love that dog, but that doesn't mean it should be bred from. Not just from a health perspective, but also from a temperamental perspective, because more dogs are put to sleep on an annual basis on the back of behavior problems than they are health these days, because of pet insurance and because of, you know, how advanced our veterinary care now is. Lots of dogs with health issues can be treated. Behavioural issues are much more difficult to live with. They take a lot more skill, time and effort and finances to fix. And unfortunately, euthanasia with the higher end issues is what happens to those dogs. I think the stat was in 2019, 32,500 and something dogs were euthanized because of behavioural problems. That's a huge amount of dogs. A huge amount of dogs. So for me, I am super excited about the fitness to breed certificate, and I can't wait to be writing my fitness to breed certificates, and I can stand and say, and this is this dog and this is why I'm breeding from it and this is its good points and these are the things that I need to work on. So when I select my mating partner for this particular dog, I am, you know, where it may be a little bit too biddable, I want something that's a little bit more bold, for example, so that I can evidence best practice, I can evidence what I'm doing as a breeder, and I can be excellent at what I do. And I, you know, I would hope that, you know, everybody else is coming from it from that hymn sheet as well. And
I was just going to say on that as well, Rebecca, me being born and knowing the legislation, is I did welcome the introduction to an age limit, because and it's the other bits that you mentioned, they're going to implement them in higher and lower standards. So when I look at higher standards, the maximum breeding age is 8. But when I used to train people on lower and talk about lower standard, there isn't a maximum age. And I used to get asked, so you can just breed a dog whenever, to whatever age. Obviously, there's a limit on how many litters they can have. Which again could be something for conversation, because it, you know, it's whether people view that as relatively high or not. But it always kind of besides me as to why isn't there a limit for lower standard and on what age you can breed a bitch. So that is welcomed. So I'm intrigued when they bring in, obviously, the fit to breeder. Are they going to do something similar, or is it going to be across the board? Is it going to be higher? Is it going to be lower? Or are they going to say that's just for higher standard? And I think, you know, not to pick out a particular breed, but obviously when we went into lockdown and we had a lot of the breeds that have come about, you know, like the XL bully, for instance, and the temperament. And I'm not here, you know, I've got no like personal opinion on any breed, whether they were rightly or wrongly banned or whatever. Everyone can make their own viewpoints on that. but they've had to do something to include that, and I think it's right. I think there needed to be some analysis to say, you know, are we, because I know you probably are doing it all the time in your policy, you have to go through and look at behavioural issues as one of the policies. You know, dog, and you have to say what you would do. Would you breed them? What would you castrate them, or whatever? But it hasn't been clear and concise enough, especially with the inconsistency across councils. There's something like this, like we've said about, you know, the dog poo, for instance. It just needs to be clear. This is what you've got
It needs to be clear. It just needs to be clear. It needs to be clear. But I think for me, the fitness to breed certificate, I mean, you know, the maximum breeding age, yeah, let me just backtrack a minute. The maximum breeding age thing needs to be unified across the board in terms of licensing and across local authorities, but it also needs to be mirrored in registrations. It's no good your council saying, you know, you can't breed a dog past 6 years old, but the registration organisation's still allowing registrations to happen for litters that are bred up a bitch that's older than that, for example. So for me, it needs to be unified everywhere, right? How many C-sections a bitch had needs to be the same everywhere with registration organisations and with local authority. It just needs to be the rules. The rules. There's no grey area. They reckon that it's okay for this and they say that it's okay for that. None of that. Let's be clear across the board. Everybody that's working with dogs needs to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And
can I just add, sorry, and I don't want to go off on a different part of the UK, but I know in 2021 Scotland, because you mentioned the C-sections.
Yeah.
Scotland introduced that if it was a breed, and I know someone mentioned about the bully, French bulldogs and the short-nosed breeds, you know, about them, and it's something going to be tackled. But I know in Scotland they introduced a breed in a category 3, which is not just French bulldogs. There's others. I think German.
There's a few. Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Falls under that. If they required a C-section and the vet felt they would need another, they were not able to breed that anymore. Which in England at the moment you're still allowed 2 C-sections for lower standard, albeit.
Yeah.
So things like that may end up being a way in which they feel that's worked in Scotland. Does it work in the UK?
Well, the data will be available, won't it?
UK and England, sorry.
Yeah, the data will be available. But who's policing that? You know, did that bitch have that litter by C-section? No.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
right. Okay, then.
Yeah.
But what are they going to do? Flip her upside down and have a look? You know, that's if they turn up when she's got puppies on her. That's if they even physically look at the dogs in that way. A lot of licensing inspectors are frightened of dogs. They don't want to actually handle the dogs. They wouldn't know what they were looking for when it came to a C-section. You know, like how do you police that? It's really difficult.
And the enforcement officers, and I say this all the time too when I'm on workshops or speaking to members, the enforcement officers will at one point be licensing a chip shop, a pub, and then visiting your property to deal with the dogs. And again, like you just pointed out correctly, there is they probably haven't even got a dog of their own. And what are they checking for?
I could not agree with you more. I've been speaking to a couple of licensing officers recently, trying to advise them and give them some training and some support, because they are dealing with two separate issues at polar ends of the country, actually opposite ends of the country, and they're both trying to revoke licenses from people that they do not feel that they are appropriately breeding anymore, but they don't feel that they have the knowledge and the clout to utilize the guidance to formulate a report to revoke the license. In their heart of hearts, they know something's not quite right and it shouldn't be happening that way, but they don't really know what they're looking at well enough. But bless, both of these licensing officers are concerned about it enough that they've come to me saying, please, can you help me?
Yeah. Well, you know, good,
and that's great, but it's a shame at the same time that they're in that position.
Yeah. You know, don't worry, you know, with the lack of can I ask a question to the chat, actually? There was an update June last year in addition to this legislation in England, and the update was every time you have a litter of puppies, you must inform your local enforcement officer for them to be aware, just in case they might want to do an off-the-cuff inspection to see how you handle and whelp on a litter. Can I ask, has anyone been told that? Because various people have said they've not. And no. if you have you told them and you've not had a reply? Because that seems to want. Has anyone got anything other than that as the narrative?
See, I'll give them a couple of minutes to type and come back. Ian says, yep, we have to. Rasa says, no, haven't heard of that. I don't have to. Susan says no. Tanya says hers do not want to be informed. No, so it's a mixed. Ian has to. No, most people are saying no.
No. And it's, it's a shame, isn't it? Because obviously we've gone back to, I say it's a shame, you may agree with it or not, but you've got to remember it's done with the best intent. If we're informing them that we've got a litter on the ground, it's that registration, it's that tracking, it's that ensuring that things are done correctly. Whether it seems like a task that why do we have to complete or not, and this is the knowledge side of things. When is your enforcement officer, it's great that one of them have said, yeah, we have to, we've been informed, but when are you informed of updates of legislation? And that's kind of where our network developed from, with our members, because we update them before some our members now know more than their enforcement officer.
Yeah,
but you feel, yeah, you have
quite
to.
Common, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Especially when you're getting asked to put drainage in your kitchen because that's where you're in a domestic setting and the dogs sleep there. So, and these are some of the things we hear.
Oh, I'm losing your audio a little bit, Will.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, that's it. Sit a bit closer. No, and I think my overarching feel of what I've read in it is that I welcome what they're talking about. There's nothing in there that I'm like, well, that's ridiculous, I don't agree with that, or I think my reservations are in the delivery of it all, and how it's going to be policed. And I think that what I kind of want to say to all the breeders on the call is, please have your voices heard. There are surveys that get published. Please complete them. Please take part. There are parliamentary meetings that you guys can attend. There are ways and means of having your voices heard. And please do so. Please do so, because I think the feedback is really important. And you're not alone. There are people that are advocates for you. Will's one of them. I'm one of them. We want you guys to have the opportunity to be educated. We want you guys to have the opportunity to have community, feel supported, and for the good of the dogs. That anybody that knows me knows that's where I come from on it all. And we do want the arena to be improved across the board. So, but that's not going to happen unless we all stick our tuppence worth in. Joe Taylor's asking a really interesting one, and this is, I've got it written on my piece of paper. It's the last point. What about retired dogs and whether you can keep them?
Okay, so it's a double-edged sword, really, especially when they're looking at tightening up on how many allowable dogs and puppies are allowed. And some councils are a bit stricter than others, like, you're allowed so many puppies and so many dogs. The retired dog, or a dog maybe not fit for breeding for whatever reason you decide to keep, is still part of your licensing register, even though you're not using them. A stud dog is included in that. I can't. The way that they gauge it is: are you physically able to keep a bitch currently having a litter, get them to exercise, and go and do whatever 4 times a day whilst away from other boys? And how does your operation allow for that when they're making their judgments? So as a licensed breeder or any responsible breeder, keeping the main girl at maybe the start of everything, or the love for that you have for that animal, it's hard because you want to retain them. But the double-edged sword is that can then restrict you in the future on how many litters or what you can do moving forward. And especially when we've talked about HMRC breathing, well, the business testers, they're breathing down our case, and the cost of everything, from licensing to, I've had remarks to one breeder, but you just need to breed more to make money. You need to operate as a business. Is that the right way of going about it? Probably not. It's not good for that money there, is it? So yeah, the double-edged sword is it can affect what you can do moving forward. You know,
yeah, I think their
the
argument
girl
is,
is
yeah,
your heart. It's like your head and your heart.
it is completely, and it's whether or not you can look after the volume of dogs. So if you keep your matriarch bitch, the one that you bred from the first time, and then obviously you've kept her daughter or her son, but usually her daughter, and then you've kept her daughter, although you've still got you know, all of these dogs down here that you're choosing to breed from, these retired dogs still have to have a quality of life. And that was the conversation that I had with my licensing inspector. She said, you can keep as many dogs as you can, as you like, providing you are able to meet the licensing requirements for all of the dogs on the register. Yeah. That was how she sort of expressed it, which I understand. I do understand. But again, because it's not consistent, and some people are told you've got to rehome your retired bitches in that kind of terminology, in that kind of narrative, it causes real discontent and upset, obviously, because it's a hugely emotive subject. Mike Evans is asking, does everybody here have the opinion that we need to be licensed to breed dogs? Can I have a yes or a no to that, please, for Mike? He would like to know the answer to that question. Emma's saying, do you not feel this makes us seem like money making if you get rid of dogs after they're no longer useful? Yeah, absolutely, Emma. I think that's the point, isn't it? Everybody's like, you know, I don't want to get rid of the dogs that I've used for breeding. They are important to me. They are my friends. And I'm not just gonna get rid because they're not going to produce puppies anymore. I think that's the thing. But they're saying that providing you can provide the appropriate environment for that dog and it meets licensing requirement, then you can keep it. They're not, you know, that's but sadly it's not interpreted in that way. So by and large, everybody is in agreement. There is one person who is not in agreement, but everybody else is in agreement that if you breed dogs, you should be licensed. End of story.
Okay. Well, that's currently the narrative anyway at the moment, isn't it? That we've kind of, you know, when we first discussed what it, partly through we discussed what it is that you need to have to be licensed. You know, you know, in all honesty, I'd find it hard that anyone can earn less than £199 unless they do give them away and take a little fee for registrations. Whether that's subject to change when they're looking at just having a set amount of litters before you need the license, we would have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
again,
that's it's not set in stone, is it? None of it is.
Yeah, these are things that they're reviewing. You know, Wales want a uniforms approach. You've mentioned that they want to have the whole of the UK using similar legislation, so it's not, you know, it's not different. You know, they're looking into that.
Absolutely.
Who knows what the future will be, but they definitely are. And this is why, you know, you mentioned the service. This is why the service is so important. You know, the PRIR, we don't actually know who's put together to say that the 2018 regulations are a success. We love some of the things they're going to be bringing in, but we don't actually know who's been involved in that. You know, if anyone ever has the chance to look at the survey that we did last year, 2024, I don't know if I can just get it up and mention it on here, just to, you know, when they're saying it's a success, Rebecca, I'll try and not digress, but I just wanted to kind of give the output of what everyone was saying last time around. Bear with me one moment.
Yeah.
So 87.5% of breeders that did the 2024 survey, when they were asked the question, do you feel the cost associated with being licensed are increasing? They said yes. Only 10% said unsure. When we asked, have you encountered any inconsistency in enforcement of regulations by different local authorities? 75% said yes, 25% no. And when we asked the question, do you believe that unlicensed breeders are undermining the efforts of licensed breeders? A whopping 92.5% said yes. Do you think there is a need for an association? Yes, 90% said you need someone to represent you. So when we look at the legislation and what they've said, the outcome is they've said they found that is the significant growth with commercial dog breeding. they've said that the 2018 regulations, and we've discussed all the different variances, that the inconsistencies, they believe that it's exceeded initial projections, it's cost saving, and councils have said that there's been consistency across the different local authorities. So, you know, what you guys are saying and what is in here is different. So it is important that you do have your voice heard, and we haven't released the 2025 survey yet, but I'll pass it on to Rebecca to pop in the chat afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give it a bit early for people who are on here. Have your say, because what we do hear from and what we do publish, we will be passing to DEFRA, and we will be speaking in Parliament. So the more breeders, you know, responsible or licensed, who have their say, you know, it'll go through various things across the UK. Do have your say. It's vitally important that we hear what you're talking about. If you're saying we all need a license and you want your voices to be heard, we want these updates to be beneficial to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. No, they've got to take, you know, got to get involved, got to take part. We've lost your audio again, Will.
Oh, have we? Am I back?
Oh, there you go. You're back. You're back. Donna's asking, the license needs all dogs to be vaccinated and boosted every year. What if you prefer to teeter test and not give lepto? I think there are no mention of these things specifically within this review document, are there?
No. I know there's a big thing about lepto 4 because it's now replaced lepto 2. They're not producing it anymore. There are different vaccinations that still have the 2 in. It depends on your veterinary practice, but I know they're all opting for lepto 4.
But there's no, you know, with regards to this particular document that we're discussing this evening, there's no mention of teeter testing or changes to the booster, the vaccination regime. You know, it doesn't discuss that in any way, shape or form, I'm afraid. So, yeah, that may be something that gets looked at later down the line, but there isn't anything in it as it stands. So is there any other questions, guys? We've been banging on for an hour now. Is there any other questions? Is there anything else you'd like to say, Will? Is there a point?
The only thing I'd like, because you've mentioned about the education, you've got some fantastic things coming up, haven't you, Rebecca, with the behavioural courses that you're going to be doing, which I think are going to be fantastic. Can I ask everyone, do they feel like there is enough resource? Because I know one of the things that they've mentioned in this is there doesn't seem to be enough education. I don't know what your thoughts are, guys, on you know, whether you've read it or not, but we were talking a bit earlier, weren't we, Rebecca, about they have, or maybe going to look at the avenue of, rather than financially impacting unlicensed breeders, having a reform process, allowing them to be educated. Obviously, there's be a fine or a point at which they say no. There are implications depending on how the welfare is conducted. But it's talking about reform, you know, maybe like, you know, you get a speed awareness course, a breeding course. Do the people out there feel like there is enough resources out there, or is there anything we can do to support?
I'll give them a couple of minutes to answer. You know, there's a raft of information out there available if you're searching for it, in my opinion. The quality of the different pieces of information is the issue, as with anything that you're searching up on the internet. I think if you're looking for education, my advice would be have it with something accredited, so CPD accredited at the lower level. Obviously CPD stands for continual professional development, so if we are wanting to evidence, and that is part of licensing guidance, that you do need to evidence continual professional development, which should be kept in an annual record. So everybody should be doing that anyway. And obviously from my perspective, we all know that I'm a tutor and a training provider of Ofqual regulated courses, and you know, I feel, and people who know me will have heard me say this before, you know, you can't be an electrician without being qualified as an electrician. You can't drive a car without having a license to do so. I think there should be education enrolled in you know, wrapped up within the licensing. That's my personal point of view on it, but obviously I am a training provider, so I'm going to say that, aren't I? I want to hear what
Yeah, but the
everybody
thing
else
is
thinks.
you're passionate around it, Rebecca,
Yeah.
and I love it because at the end of the day, it's all around the animal welfare, and I love the fact that you're creating these workshops, these courses to support people because that you can be the most seasoned breeder, licensed breeder for many years, but unless you're up to date with the legislation, new ways of doing things. We talked was a Kerry talking about different genetic testings for the interbreeding side of things. Unless we're educating each other and working together, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. And if it is reform for people who may think they don't need a license and training as a way forward, then great, because you mentioned there's some fantastic breeders out there that aren't licensed, some fantastic breeders that are licensed. So it's that's the thing that you mentioned, having certificated evidence. I think you just mentioned then they want to see that moving forward, and not just I did this. They want an actually evidence that you're ongoingly continue to develop. Continuous
Sarah
professional
Rogers is making a really good point. She's saying that resources are extremely helpful, but there needs to be recognition of experience for older breeders who are not able to do the courses. Sarah, when you say that they're not able to do the courses, can you just type me a little comment so that you explain what I mean? Do you mean not able to financially, or not able because they're online and they can't use the tech, or not able? Can you explain what you mean by not able? Because that would be really useful for me to know. I know that there are lots of government incentives available in certain arenas, that you can get grants towards training. And unfortunately, the off-qual qualifications for dog breeding do not fall within that remit. And I would like to see the off-qual qualifications, if they're going to insist that breeders have them, that they include the level 3 certificate. And Sarah saying not internet savvy and not techie. Yeah, okay, thank you, Sarah. That they did include the level 3 certificate, particularly the diploma is a bigger qualification, but the level 3 certificate within their grant scheme.
I think that needs to be the case. I think there needs to be more available. They're talking about it needing to be more resources. I think at the very beginning you say because we're such a small community, but can have a big impact. I say not necessarily maybe the license. There's a lot of puppies sold each year, so there's it has a big impact on the market in the UK. It's a $1 billion industry, if you want to call it that. But when we look at education, I think that's why I love what you do, Rebecca, because you're passion around it. There's not many around. I don't think there is any around really. I think the off-qual, we recognise pup starts here at My Licensed Breeders as the place to go. We endorse them, and our network, we say go. That's the next step. I think in regards to techie, I know a while ago when we did our CPD, we did workshops, and it's hard to get locations because we're such a small network and we're spread out. But maybe it's something we could take away, something we can work out in the future. As we grow, maybe having a one day centralized somewhere, and we can
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's
I've been looking at tagging some in-person training onto large dog events like crafts, where there would be a volume of breeders that are already there, so it would reduce down their travel costs, accommodation costs, etc., and make it a more doable thing. But whether or not people are going to be interested in that, it's difficult to get breeders that are not tech savvy to come somewhere in person. They have challenges around leaving dogs at home, dog cover and travel and stuff like that. So it does become difficult. I understand there are challenges with adult education that are not always easy, but there are students on the call this evening that will tell you that you know, a good training provider will go above and beyond to help and make things doable. I'm sure you know yourselves, Will, I know you do CPD stuff, and you know, I'm sure that if somebody came to you and said, you know, I have learning difficulties, I have struggles, I have personal challenges around, you know, being present in a Zoom room or using the tech, or you know, I've had a student go through the entire course and she is somebody who is not able to read. Okay, and she passed. Because as a decent training provider, you meet your students where they need to be met. And, you know, that means that at times, you know, I was ringing her up and reading her stuff down the phone because she needed to get the information, or doing a video call for her so she could learn it in a different way. And I think if the intention is there to do it and achieve it, I think all of us get to stand together and support one another and make that happen.
Yeah. I suppose it's like the digitalization where they kind of aiming towards that avenue as well. Would people welcome a cost reduction if that was a way in which you could evidence, look, it's easier? Because I know a lot of people have been, the vet's been on site for several hours. It's cost me an absolute fortune. If that meant a reduction in costings, is that, I don't know, is anyone using tech? It's quite hard, isn't it? I know a lot of people don't like it or prefer the paperwork. I know not every app covers every aspect of what's needed. Or do people still prefer paper?
So in the comments, guys, paper or digital, type the word. Let me know what you're thinking. I do both, actually. I have paper copies of everything because in one way I'm quite old school and I like to have the paperwork and I like to be able to put my hand on it. I don't entirely trust tech not to go wrong and to lose my information, and for me to not be able to access it easily. If I, you know, I live rurally, my internet connection is crap at the best of times. So, you know, I don't want issues around not being able to get stuff, but I do use you know, digital versions of everything because I've got, so then I've got both. Let's have a look at these comments. Digital only, both pen and paper, digital, paper, both paper, both paper, starting to swap to more online, both paper, both. So a real mixture, I would say. Yeah, a lot of people saying both. Only one person saying fully digital. Most people are saying both.
So it's the people who have said paper. If it meant that it would save them money, just to ask you, if it saved you money, and not to say this is the case, they've only suggested it. All of these are suggestions that they put forward. Would you change to digital, or would that be a point at which you say, you know what, I'm not going to continue? I suppose that, you know, with I can't remember the lady's name, with the training aspect, is that kind of where people are at?
Oh, we've lost your audio again.
I'm back. No, I'm back here. I'm just being quiet.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if anyone answers that question. If
yeah,
if
sorry,
anyone who put paper, if has anyone said, well, they would convert if it costs less licensing, because they've insinuated that being the outcome.
Okay. All right. So a yes or no, guys, on that one. If it cost you less, would you go digital? Yes or no? I think one element of the document that I do like is the fact that they have acknowledged that councils pushing for planning permission has created a situation where some breeders, good quality breeders, are moving out of breeding because it's just too difficult for them, and they've acknowledged that that has a negative impact upon the breeding scene. So, you know, I thought it was really good that that had been actually acknowledged within the document, because they do, in doing so, acknowledge the need for good, ethical, quality breeders. Yeah, they're supporting good quality breeding, aren't they, in that statement?
Yes.
Which is a good thing. Okay, so no. Yes, it's a fortune in ink. I'd go full digital for less dollar. Finding it easy online, always at your fingertips. Yes, I may try both. Yes, Mike Evans says cost less for what? No, because it can fail and then you're stuck. Susan Cook says she's moving over to the digital Pawprint. So a bit of a mixed bag. Yeah, I think generally it's a yes. Jenny
Well,
said she'd love to go digital, but she's scared she'd lose it all because she's not tech savvy.
yeah, it's a hard one because you know, a lot of our members as well have expressed that the same. You know, it's just making that transition, but it seems to be everything is going digital now. You know, we're seeing the high street banks close, and you know, we're in the technological era. They're saying now, not in the pioneering era.
We
So
are.
I just wanted to gain a little bit more insight and thoughts on that, because if it did cost less, then great. But is that actually going to help?
Mixed bag in the responses there, I think. Brilliant. Okay then, guys. Well, if there's no more questions and no more points to make, I think I've pretty much covered everything that I wanted to pick out from the guidance. I've gone through it in kind of chronological order and pulled out my thoughts on it, and I think we've kind of covered a lot, really. Will, is there anything else that you feel that you want to add?
No, and if anything's been missed, you know, quite happy for anyone to reach out and have the conversation. You know, we're quite open over here in My Licensed Breeder to talk to anyone, whether licensed or not. We're here as a supportive network. Although we have the network of licensed breeders that we advocate for, we don't want anyone to kind of be afraid, you know, it was scared to cross over, because we welcome anyone who puts the welfare of the animals first. You know, although we're unsure of who's actually put this information forward for the PIR, there's a lot of positives, and welfare being the fundamental part of it. So, again, absolutely. Have your say. We've had our say, haven't we, Becca? We've had a little chat. So I'll pass over the link for the 2025 survey. It hasn't been published yet, but anyone in this chat who's been a part of it can have their say first and foremost, and we can see what everyone else his thoughts are.
Yeah, definitely. Just an FYI, if people have joined late, not watched it all, want to rewatch what we've spoken about again, or want to point other people to the video, I will be pinning it to the featured section of this group, and it will remain there for at least a month. We probably won't leave it up too much longer than that, because it's guidance, it changes, and if they were to, you know, publish something else, which they may well do, then what we've spoken about tonight would then not be accurate potentially. So we will leave it there for a period of time, but we won't leave it there forever. But it will be in the featured section of the post list. And thank you, Will. Thank you for coming and talking to us about it tonight. If anybody is interested in learning about My Licensed Breeder, you should go over and have a look. I'm a member. You should go over and have a look at what they're doing over there. And like I say, you know, it is a case of everybody standing together. And if you've got, you know, people like Will who are providing a service for licensed breeders, people like myself who are providing education, and I know Will does some education as well, but we've got the off-qual courses over here and some CPD with what we're doing. Everybody's working together. We can start to make a proper difference, yeah, and we all get to be excellent at what we do, which I know you guys, if you're here tonight and you're watching this, it's because you really do care about what you're doing and you're motivated about it, and we want to champion and stand by people like you guys. So we are here to advocate for you, but you know, we can only do that if you come and get involved, yeah. But thank you very much. I'm going to shut up Rabbit in now, and it's 8:45 and I need to have my dinner. I'm like starving.
Thank you everybody as well. Yeah, I really appreciate you listening to me albert on, but no, thank you for inviting me as well, Rebecca. It's been great to talk about what's obviously important to everybody, so thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for coming. Right then, guys, I will catch up with you soon. Take care.
Bye now.